Hi everybody, welcome to Rain Shadows channel, where stories whisper with the rain. Before we begin, make sure everything is ready for a deep sleep. Close your eyes, relax your body, and let your mind drift with each tale. Don't forget to like and subscribe channel so you won't miss the next video. Now come with me into the darkness.
It was raining the day I found it. I'd gone to the campus library to get out of the cold more than anything else. Midterms were approaching, and the building always smelled faintly of dust and tired paper. Comforting in a way that reminded me of being younger, of hiding in corners between shelves where no one else looked. I didn't go there often. Not anymore. That day I wandered further than usual. Past the main study rooms, past the literature wing, into the back stacks where the lights buzzed faintly and the books wore more dust than fingerprints. That's where I saw it. A thin, black-bound book wedged between two overstuffed volumes on comparative mythology. Its spine was blank, no title, no author, just a single barcode sticker near the bottom corner, slightly crooked. I pulled it free. It was heavier than it looked. The cover was smooth but oddly cold. When I opened it, the pages felt thick, almost too thick, like someone had used the wrong kind of paper. There was no title page, no table of contents, just a first line. He didn't know when the watching began. I flipped forward. The text was clean, printed in a serif font that looked oddly dated. The story was strange but compelling, written in short, clipped sentences, almost like diary entries. It followed a man who slowly realized something was observing him. Not following, observing. From corners, reflections, dreams. I was hooked. I read for over an hour, standing there between shelves until my legs went numb. Then I checked it out at the front desk. The scanner beeped once. The librarian, an undergrad I vaguely recognized, looked confused. She scanned it again. Nothing. The barcode didn't register. She tried typing in the number manually, but the system returned no matches. She frowned, then shrugged and waved me on. "Must be a catalogue error," she muttered. "Just bring it back when you're done." I nodded and left, clutching the book tightly beneath my jacket. That night, I read another 50 pages. The writing got weirder, disjointed. The narrator began noticing things he'd forgotten doing. Lights turned on when he was sure he'd turned them off. Pages of his notebook filled with writing he didn't remember leaving. But what unsettled me most wasn't the story. It was how familiar the setting had become. The layout of the narrator's apartment. The creak in the hallway floorboards. The chipped mug he always used in the morning. They mirrored my own life a little too closely. I chalked it up to coincidence, my mind filling in the blanks. That's what fiction does, after all. It adapts to the reader. Still, when I tried to look up the book the next day, I found nothing. No listings, no author credit, no ISBN. It was like it had never been written at all. But it was sitting on my desk, waiting. The next time I opened the book, something was different. I had left off on page 107 the night before. I remembered clearly the scene had ended with the narrator hearing a knock on his apartment door that never came again. But when I flipped back to that same page the following evening, the text had shifted. Not the tone, not the plot, the words themselves. The knock was still there, but now it had been followed by a voice. A single sentence spoken through the door. One the narrator didn't recognize, but which left him shaken. "We see you now." That line hadn't been there before. I checked my notes. I'd written a line from that exact page in the margin of my notebook the night before. The original sentence had ended mid-thought. I remembered wondering if it was a typo. Now the paragraph was whole. I turned back 5 pages, then forward 10. More changes, details that hadn't existed. New paragraphs describing the narrator walking through his living room barefoot, stepping on a crack in the tile he hadn't noticed before. I looked down at my own floor, the same crack, the same place. I flipped forward again. The scene described a mug shattering in the sink as the narrator rinsed it. At that exact moment, from the kitchen behind me, I heard a sharp crash. I ran in. My favorite mug, chipped, white ceramic, lay in shards in the basin, a wet ring still circling the drain. I hadn't touched it all day. I stared at it for a long time before returning to the book. My hands were shaking now. I read faster. The narrator no longer felt like a character. He was doing what I was doing. feeling what I was feeling. The wording became eerily close to my own thoughts. His doubts, his habits, his pacing around the room, the way he kept checking the door, even when he knew it was locked. I turned to the last page I hadn't yet read. It was blank, but only for a moment. As I watched, words began to appear, slowly, as if typed by an invisible hand. One line at a time. He turns the page again, even though he knows what's waiting. He tells himself it's just fiction. He doesn't notice the window behind him begin to shift. I froze. The room was silent, but I felt it. Air, cold and faint, brushing the back of my neck. I turned around. The window was closed, still locked, but the curtain had moved, just slightly. Enough to make me wonder if something had been there, watching. I left the book on a bench outside the student union that night. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even look back. I walked home fast, hands deep in my coat pockets, trying to convince myself it was over, that whatever had happened, whatever the book was out of my hands now. I barely slept. The apartment felt wrong without it. Not empty, just incomplete, like something had been removed that wasn't supposed to be. I told myself it was detachment, the same way you feel after finishing a haunting story, but I hadn't finished it, and I don't think it was finished with me. The next morning, the book was back. It sat on my desk, exactly where I always placed it. No dirt, no rain, no signs of travel, just there, waiting. I didn't touch it at first, I just stared. Then slowly, I opened to the last page I remembered seeing. New text had appeared. He leaves it behind, thinking that will end it. It's never that easy. He dreams of nothing, and yet something stares back. He wakes before dawn, there is static in the walls. I backed away. That was exactly what had happened, verbatim. I checked the timestamp on my phone from when I woke during the night. 4:12 a.m. No dreams. Just silence and the low hiss of something I'd blamed on the heating vents. I closed the book and shoved it into a drawer. That night, I dreamt of pages. Not stories, not words. Just endless sheets of white fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel, and in the distance, something turning the pages with hands I couldn't see. When I woke, the drawer was open. The book rested on my chest. I opened it again, slowly. A new passage had written itself. He tries to resist, but his story is already being written. His fingers move even when he doesn't want them to. I dropped the book, heart thudding. My hands trembled. Then, without thinking, I picked up a pen. I didn't know why. I didn't want to write anything, but my hand moved anyway. I flipped to the blank page at the back and scrawled, "Who's writing this?" I closed the book, took a deep breath, counted to 10, then reopened it. The message was gone, replaced with, "You are," and below it, "You're almost done." I didn't open the book again for 3 days. I kept it shut, buried under old textbooks, hidden deep in the closet behind winter coats I hadn't touched in years. I told myself if I didn't look, didn't read, didn't acknowledge, then maybe it would stop. It didn't. I started finding pages, single sheets of thick off-white paper tucked into unexpected places, inside the fridge, behind the mirror in the bathroom, pressed between the folds of a t-shirt I hadn't worn since summer, always blank at first glance. But if I looked long enough, if I tilted the page beneath a certain light, the words would surface, faint, silvery, like breath-fogging glass, one line per page. He's still pretending he's in control. The book doesn't need covers anymore. He'll open it again. They always do. And then last night I did. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to know. I sat at my desk, turned on the lamp and placed the book gently in front of me. The pages opened easily. They knew. The text picked up where I had left off, mid-thought, as if there had been no pause, no gap, no resistance. It described my hand on the lamp switch, the soft creak of the chair, the ache at the base of my skull from a week of poor sleep. It described everything, exactly as it was happening, and then it turned predictive. He will hesitate before reading the final page. He will consider closing the book. He won't. I swallowed hard and turned to the last page. It was blank, just like before. But I waited as the letters surfaced slowly, one stroke at a time, like something invisible was writing directly onto the paper. The story ends when he looks away. I didn't blink, didn't breathe. The ink kept forming, and he's looking away. I turned my head just for a second toward the door, toward the sound I thought I heard. When I looked back down, the page had changed again. Too late. Then beneath it, "It's already here." And finally the last line, It's standing right behind you. I didn't move. I didn't turn. I just sat there, heart crashing against my ribs, eyes fixed on that final sentence. The room had gone cold, utterly still. And I understood then, this wasn't a story I had entered. It was a story that had entered me. It was supposed to be my last delivery of the night. The sun had already dipped below the edge of the city, casting everything in that deep blue hue between day and full dark. The kind of light where everything looks softer, but feels sharper. I was tired, my back ached, my eyes were heavy. I just wanted to drop the package, mark it complete, and head home. The address came through like all the others, plain text, a simple location pin, no special instructions. The route looked unfamiliar, but I'd driven in this area before. Rural outskirts, sparse lighting, quiet roads. I plugged the destination into my GPS and the map loaded smoothly. The robotic voice told me to take a right off the main road. I did. Then another turn. Then another. Soon the street lamps disappeared. So did the houses. I kept glancing at the screen. The route was still active. The blue line still guided me forward, and the voice kept chiming in at regular intervals, unbothered. But the road narrowed. The pavement grew rough, patchy in places, and gave way to gravel. On either side, tall trees leaned in, forming a canopy overhead that blocked out what was left of the sky. Still, the GPS voice was calm, unchanging. Continue for 1.3 miles. I hesitated. There were no houses here, no driveways, no signs of life, just forest, dense, silent. But I followed it. I told myself it was just a weird address, maybe a farm tucked back somewhere, or an off-grid cabin. People lived in strange places these days, remote, quiet, private. Another half-mile passed and the gravel road turned to dirt. Potholes dotted the path. Tree roots jutted like bones through thin earth. And then, signal loss. First the phone, then the GPS. The screen froze, the voice stopped mid-sentence. The map held steady for a few seconds, then glitched, reloaded, and went blank. No route, no location, just a grey screen and a spinning icon. I tapped the screen, nothing. I stopped the car. Ahead, the road opened slightly into a small clearing. Circular, flat, like something had been there once but no longer was. A fire pit, a foundation. It was hard to tell in the dark. I rolled down the window. Silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses against your ears. I turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there listening. Then I noticed something in the headlights, the ground. It wasn't just dirt, it was wet. And there were footprints, dozens of them pressed deep into the mud, leading inward. All pointed in one direction, toward my car. I opened the door slowly. The creak of the hinges sounded louder than it should have, swallowed up by the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but waiting. The air was damp, thick with the smell of wet earth and moss. I stepped out cautiously, the gravel crunching underfoot. My headlights cast long shadows across the clearing. The mist that had settled on the ground clung to my ankles like fingers. It wasn't cold, but I shivered anyway. I walked toward the footprints. There were more than I had first seen, at least a dozen sets. Bare feet, most of them. Small, some larger. The impressions were deep, sharp in the mud, as if made recently. They circled the clearing, then converged into a trail that led directly toward my car, from every direction. And yet, there were no return tracks, no indication that anyone had left. I scanned the tree line. The forest around the clearing was impossibly dense. No paths. No visible break between the trees. Just black trunks and deeper black beyond them. No animals stirred. No wind moved the branches. Even the usual sounds of insects were missing. I pulled my phone from my pocket again. Still no signal. Just a spinning wheel and a blank map. The flashlight barely worked. It flickered, then steadied just enough to let me make out the edges of the clearing. There were no buildings, no signs, no mailbox, no one. But the GPS had said arrive. I turned to go back to the car, and that's when I heard it. A sound. Faint, close, not a voice, not quite. More like a whisper too distorted to understand. It didn't come from the left or right. It came from everywhere, around me, behind me, within me. I froze, held my breath. The sound stopped. I backed up slowly, eyes locked on the trees. Then I saw it, just for a second. A shadow, low to the ground, moving quickly along the edge of the clearing, just outside the reach of the headlights. Then gone. No footsteps, no leaves rustling, but the whisper returned. Closer. I turned and ran back to the car. Slipped in the mud once, palm scraping gravel, then got up and scrambled for the door. Slammed it shut, locked it. The car was dead. Dashboard dark. Key turned in the ignition, nothing. No crank, no lights, only silence. Then, with a low buzz, the GPS screen lit up again. No map, no destination, just a black screen with white text, "Stay still." I didn't move. The message on the GPS glowed dimly in the dark. "Stay still." I stared at it, unsure if it was a warning or a command. My hands were trembling, but I kept them pressed against my lap. My breath slowed, not by choice, but by instinct. Like some ancient part of me remembered what it meant to hide from predators in the dark. Outside, the clearing was still. No wind, no movement, but the mist had thickened. It now hugged the car like a second skin, curling along the windows, smearing the edges of the glass. The trees beyond had all but vanished. It felt like being at the bottom of a frozen lake. The GPS flickered again, then held. I glanced at the mirrors. Rear view, driver side, passenger. Nothing, no shapes, no shadows. But then I noticed the condensation on the windshield. It was thick and spreading, but not evenly. It was forming finger streaks from the outside, soft smears like someone dragging wet fingers slowly across the glass. One line at a time, then another, wider. I held my breath again. The whispering returned. Closer now. Still unintelligible, still impossible to localize, but heavy like breath fogging into the back of my skull. It filled the cabin without sound, without origin, just presence. Then came the tapping. It started on the passenger window. Light, delicate, knuckles, not nails. Then behind me, on the rear windshield, 2 taps, then 3, then silence. I stared into the rearview mirror, still nothing, until a flicker. A shape, standing just behind the car, tall, still, no features, just the suggestion of a body, like a figure drawn in charcoal and erased at the edges. It stood motionless, arms at its sides facing the car directly. My heart pounded in my throat. I didn't blink, didn't turn, didn't breathe. The GPS glowed again, new text, "Do not look away." The tapping stopped. I didn't move. Time blurred. 5 minutes, 10, maybe more. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the mist began to lift. The shape faded, the streaks on the glass stopped forming, and the whispering dissolved. The GPS shut off. The dashboard lights blinked back to life, and the car started, like nothing had happened. But something had, because when I looked down at the floor mat, there were muddy footprints. On the inside, I didn't look back. The engine roared to life like nothing had happened. No misfire, no delay. The lights came on. The dashboard blinked. Everything was fine, on the surface. I shifted into reverse, carefully turned the car around in the tight clearing, and began the drive back the way I'd come. But the road wasn't the same. It was longer, twistier. The turns felt unfamiliar, even though I hadn't taken any new ones. There were no forks, no detours, just one winding path through endless woods, and the forest didn't end. What had taken me 15 minutes before now stretched into 30, then 40. Still no cell signal, still no moonlight, even though the sky had cleared. Just that same dim stretch of trees and dirt and silence pressing in on either side. I stopped the car twice, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Each time, the GPS screen remained dark. Each time, the road behind me looked exactly the same as the one ahead. Eventually, I saw headlights, oncoming traffic, street signs, the hum of the main road returning beneath my tires. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. But even as I merged back onto the highway, the unease didn't leave. When I returned to the city, I drove straight to the depot, eager to drop the last delivery and put it all behind me. My supervisor looked confused when I handed over the sealed package. She asked why I brought it back. I told her no one was there to receive it. She frowned, then checked the records. There was no last order, no entry under that address, no dispatch logged with my name on it after 6 p.m. I asked about the customer's contact info. She said the profile was blank. She showed me the dashboard. My delivery list ended 2 hours earlier than I remembered. There was no record of the route. I opened the app on my own phone. The history was gone. The GPS data for that entire window, empty. Like it had been wiped. Or like it had never existed in the first place. I went home, still in my uniform, and washed the car. But no matter how many times I scrubbed, the faint outline of muddy footprints on the floor mats wouldn't come off. I powered off my phone, turned it back on, opened the GPS app, and there it was, a new address, marked with a red heart icon like something I had saved. But I hadn't. I tapped on it. No street name, no city, just a pin dropped in the middle of an empty field where no road should be. And the name of the location? Come back. When I first moved into the building, everything felt easy. The kind of easy that makes you nervous after a while. Brand new units. White walls, clean corners, smart panels in every room. A lobby that smelled like lemon and stone. It had that sterile kind of luxury people chase when they want to pretend their lives are under control. And for a little while, mine was. The elevator was one of those ultra-modern glass panel types, smooth and silent, with floor selection done through a touch screen. Fast, responsive, no delay. It felt like stepping into the future. I live on the 7th floor. My days and nights revolved mostly between work, home and the occasional late-night run to the laundry room on floor 4, the one that also held the small gym. At least, that's what I thought. It was maybe the 4th or 5th night when I first noticed it. I had left my apartment just past midnight, basket in hand, earbuds in. I pressed the touchscreen, selected floor 4 out of habit, and leaned against the wall, half asleep. The elevator began to move, then skipped. Straight from floor 3 to floor 5. At first, I thought I mispressed. I went back down, watched the screen carefully. Floor 3, then 5 stopped. I tried again. Same result. The button for floor 4 lit up, acknowledged my touch, but the elevator refused to stop there. I shrugged it off. Minor glitch, a software update. I'd ask building management later. The next day, I took the stairs down to check. The stairwell door to floor 4 was locked. Unlike the others, which opened without resistance. I tried my access card. Nothing. I asked the night guard on duty, an older man who rarely looked up from his crossword puzzles. He paused for a second, then said, "Floor 4's not really used much. It's mostly utility. Best to leave it alone." It sounded like a brush-off. The more I tried to let it go, the more it stayed with me. A whole floor, inaccessible, ignored, but still there. That night, I watched the elevator camera through the building's resident app, a feature I rarely used. Between 12 and 3 a.m., it made several trips. Floor 2, floor 3, then jumped to 5, every time, except once. At 2:47 a.m., the camera feed showed the elevator stop. Doors opened. The screen read, floor 4. There was no one inside, no one waiting, and yet the doors remained open for 9 full seconds before sliding shut. I checked the log. No request had been made. No one had pressed the button. The elevator had simply stopped on its own. I couldn't let it go. Something about the way those elevator doors lingered open at floor 4 made my skin crawl. 9 seconds is a long time to wait for no one. Too long. The building had a maintenance app for residents, the kind that lets you report flickering lights or book the rooftop barbecue space. But if you knew where to look, buried deep in the interface, there was a section marked Surveillance Access, designed, supposedly, for security transparency. Most residents never touched it. I did. I started watching, night after night. The feed was simple. 4 angles inside the elevator cab and 1 black and white camera on each hallway near the elevator doors. I set motion triggers for between 12 and 3 a.m. and waited. On the second night, it happened again. 2:46 a.m., no button press recorded, no keycard access. But the elevator stopped at floor 4. Doors opened, this time for exactly 10 seconds, no movement inside. But the hallway camera flickered, just once, enough to catch my attention. I rewound it, frame by frame. In one of those frames, barely a second, there was a figure, human-shaped, unmoving, standing in the middle of the hallway, facing the elevator. No features, no definition, just a silhouette, darker than the shadows around it. Next frame, gone. I checked the footage from every other floor. Nothing. Only floor 4. Only that one frame. I played the sequence again and again, hoping it was an artifact, a glitch in compression. But each time, the figure appeared at the exact same moment the elevator opened, as if it had been waiting. The next night, I sat awake in bed watching the feed in real time, 2:50 a.m. The elevator began to descend on its own. No request, no just moving. Down. It stopped. Floor 4, doors opened. The hallway camera flickered again, but this time the screen didn't freeze. It cut to static. And the elevator interior dimmed slightly, just for a moment. Like something inside had shifted the light. Then the doors closed. The elevator continued to floor 5. No one inside. except for the faintest trace of something wet along the back wall. I watched it in silence and noticed for the first time that condensation had formed on the interior camera lens, inside a sealed elevator, 3 stories up. That night I slept with the app open beside me. The last entry in the log showed the elevator stopping on floor 4 again. At 3:03 a.m, no movement, no request, just a destination. It happened at 11:59 p.m, I hadn't planned it. I was on my way to the lobby to grab a delivery I'd forgotten, half asleep, thumb tapping aimlessly on the elevator panel, not paying attention. I pressed the wrong button. Floor 4. The light blinked. My breath caught. I moved to cancel it, but the elevator was already descending. The panel glowed faintly. 3, 4, it stopped. For the first time in weeks, maybe ever, the elevator stopped on floor 4. A soft chime echoed. The doors opened. What greeted me wasn't what I remembered. The hallway was darker than it should have been. The lights overhead buzzed, flickered slightly, as if struggling to hold on to power. The walls, always painted in a bland off-white, looked stained, discoloured. The air smelled like damp concrete and something older beneath it. A cold draft rolled through the elevator. I hesitated, then stepped out. The floor beneath my feet felt uneven, like I was walking on something soft beneath the tile. The doors slid closed behind me without a sound, no chime, no delay, just gone. I turned around to press the button again, but the panel was gone. There was no elevator, just blank wall, smooth, seamless, as if the shaft had never existed. Panic didn't come immediately. Instead, it crept in, slow and cold, wrapping itself around my spine. I moved forward, calling out softly into the hall, knowing I wouldn't hear a response. Doors lined either side, all closed, each with peeling numbers, 4B, 4C, but the letters were smudged, tilted, like they'd been tampered with. I reached for the nearest handle, locked. Next one, same. Third one, the knob turned. I pushed. Inside was a room, empty, walls stripped bare, floor coated in dust, no furniture, no light. Just a single chair in the centre, facing the wall. I stepped back. The hallway lights dimmed again. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine, from the far end of the corridor. Slow, deliberate, barefoot, soft slap against tile. I backed toward where the elevator should have been. Still nothing. I reached the stairwell door, shoved it open. Concrete wall, no stairs, just raw grey cement. I turned back to the hallway. The footsteps had stopped, but something was there now. A silhouette at the far end, tall, still, facing me. The lights buzzed louder, then one blinked out, then another. The darkness crept forward, section by section, like falling dominoes. I pressed myself against the wall, searching for another door, another seam, another escape. There was nothing. Just the corridor. Just the darkness. And the thing at the end of it. I woke up on my bed, fully dressed, shoes on. Phone still in my pocket. The clock on the wall blinked 6:12 a.m. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and grey, as if the night had never happened, as if I had simply passed out after a long day. But my heart was pounding, my mouth dry, and there was dust on my hands, the kind you only get from touching old things, forgotten things. I stood up, walked to the living room. Everything was as I'd left it, the couch, the keys on the counter, the half-finished glass of water on the table. Normal, but I knew it wasn't. The memory of the hallway was too clear, the flickering lights, the doors that led nowhere, the footsteps, that thing at the far end. I could still feel the cold from the concrete wall where the stairwell should have been. It hadn't been a dream. I opened the building's app, pulled up the elevator logs. Nothing. No activity between 11:58 p.m. and 6 a.m. I tried the security camera feeds. The one inside the elevator showed me getting in at 11:58 p.m. Then static. No exit. No floor 4. Just a blank space in time, as if I had disappeared. I went downstairs to the lobby. The morning guard was there, yawning behind his desk. I asked him about floor 4. He blinked, then smiled politely. "There's no floor 4, sir. Didn't they tell you during move-in? It's a superstition thing. Some cultures skip it entirely, straight from 3 to 5. I stared at him, then turned toward the elevator, pressed the call button, stepped in. 3, 5, 6, 7. No 4. No blank space, just missing. I took the stairs down, counting carefully. 3 flights between 7 and 4. 4 between 4 and the lobby. But when I stopped on the landing where floor 4 should have been, there was no door, just smooth concrete. No seam, no handle, No sign anything had ever been there. Later that day, I ran into the building's maintenance tech in the hallway. I asked him offhand if they'd ever had reports of glitches in the elevator, anything odd, maybe around midnight. He paused, then shrugged. The system resets itself at 3 a.m. every night, wipes temp logs, saves memory. If something happened, it's gone by morning. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up watching the elevator feed again. It moved between floors like usual. Bright, normal, empty. Until 2:59 a.m., the feed froze. A flicker, a blank panel lit up on the touchscreen. Just one word, returning, then nothing. The next morning, I found a push notification on my phone from the elevator system, unread. Sent at 3:03 a.m. Your ride to floor 4 is ready. Everyone in our town knew the story. At the northern edge of the old highway, just before the road dipped into forest, there was a tunnel, short and narrow, built of crumbling stone and blackened brick. No official name, no signs. Just a cold, arched mouth in the hillside where kids dared each other to go. We called it the Screaming Tunnel. The legend was simple. If you walked into the tunnel at exactly midnight and lit a match at its center, you'd hear a scream. Not a shout, not a moan, a scream. Sharp, high, furious. They said it belonged to a girl who had died there long ago, burned alive by someone who wanted her silence more than her life. Some said her spirit haunted the tunnel, trapped in the soot-stained walls. Others said it was just a story to scare kids away. I never really believed it. Not until the night I went in alone. I was 17. The kind of age where fear feels like weakness and nothing seems truly real unless you test it yourself. My friends had all taken turns daring each other, stepping just a few feet in before running out laughing. No one ever lit the match. No one stayed until midnight. So I decided I would. It was late October, cold, dry, no moon. I parked my car 100 yards from the tunnel and walked the rest of the way with a flashlight in one hand and a matchbox in my coat pocket. The gravel crunched beneath my boots like bones snapping under snow. The tunnel looked smaller than I remembered. Up close, it wasn't just dark, it was black, like light refused to touch it. Moss covered the bricks, water dripped somewhere inside. A low, steady echo came from deep within, like breathing through stone. I stepped inside. My flashlight flickered. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath curled into the air like smoke. The tunnel wasn't long, maybe 30 feet from end to end, but once you stepped into the center, both entrances disappeared in shadow. The air grew damp. The walls were cold and slick. I checked my watch. 11:59. I waited. Seconds passed, slow and heavy. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out the matchbox, and struck one. The flame caught on the first try. It burned steady, the only light in that narrow, choking dark. I held it out in front of me and listened. The match flickered in my hand, its flame small but steady. I watched it burn, the orange glow licking at the shadows on the tunnel wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the sound of water dripping behind me. Just the smell of sulfur and cold air and damp brick. But then something shifted. Not in sight, not in sound, in pressure. The kind of shift that makes your lungs tighten. Like the room suddenly forgot how to hold air. The flame wavered, not from wind, from breath. There was something breathing inside the tunnel with me. Not loudly, not close, but deep, slow. A hollow inhale drawn from the cracks between stones, as if the tunnel itself had lungs, and I had just stepped into their rhythm. I stayed still. Let the match burn. The seconds crawled. Then came the scream. It didn't rise. It didn't grow. It exploded. From somewhere far down the tunnel, deeper than it should have gone, a sound tore through the dark like a blade through bone. It wasn't a woman's scream. It wasn't human at all. It was high, ragged, and filled with something that didn't want to be heard. Didn't echo. It filled the space, pressed into the walls, pressed into me. I felt it in my ribs, vibrating through my chest like a second heartbeat. The match twisted in my fingers, still lit, still burning. But the light felt thinner now, like the scream had eaten half of it. Then came the cold. It wasn't gradual. It hit like a wave, icy, solid, impossible. My breath vanished. The walls sweated frost. My skin stung. The flame shivered. Then died. I was alone in the dark. Total dark. Not a flicker of light. Not a single sound now. The scream had gone silent as suddenly as it came, like it had burned itself out. But the pressure remained. That horrible sense that something in the dark had opened its eyes. I fumbled for my flashlight, fingers numb, hands shaking. When I clicked it on, the beam was weak, sputtering. The batteries had been new. Still, I turned it forward. The tunnel ahead was empty, but the bricks looked warped, like they had bent inward, melted, or breathed. And the air tasted like ash. I turned to leave, and paused, because behind me, where the tunnel opened to the outside, there was no light, only dark. I ran, as fast as I could, the moment my feet remembered how. The flashlight bobbed in my hand, its beam weak and shaking, carving useless shapes into the tunnel walls. The scream still echoed in my bones, though the sound itself had vanished. What remained was worse. Silence so thick it swallowed the noise of my own steps, but I could hear them anyway. Other steps, not echoes, not mine. Softer, bare, wet, running behind me, matching my pace, not gaining, not falling behind, just there. The end of the tunnel should have been 20 feet away. I had been near the center when I lit the match. I should have seen the entrance, the trees, the faint silver of moonlight beyond. But there was only darkness, endless bricks on either side, dripping stone, no exit, no light, just more tunnel. Like it had stretched, like I had been swallowed. My lungs burned, each breath ragged, chest tightening as I pushed forward. The walls seemed to close in, pressing closer, sweating cold moisture that slicked the floor beneath my boots. And always the sound behind me, soft slaps of wet feet, a second rhythm, breathing now, too close, too human, too wrong. I didn't dare turn around, not yet. Not until I saw something familiar, a crack in the wall I'd noticed earlier, or the rusted nail sticking out at shoulder height. But there was nothing, just more dark, just more cold, just more watching. The scream hadn't come from one place, it had come from everywhere, from inside the stone, from inside me. My vision blurred. The flashlight flickered again, then died completely. I was blind, still running, still hearing footsteps behind me. And now beside me, pacing me, matching every stride. My foot caught on something, a raised stone, a slick patch, and I went down hard, hands scraped, chin slammed against the ground. I tasted iron, I didn't move, didn't breathe. The footsteps stopped, the air grew dense again, and in the dark, just behind me, I heard something shift. Closer, and then exhale, right at the back of my neck. I screamed, scrambled up, and lunged forward blindly, arms out, legs pumping, and suddenly there it was. Light. Faint, white-blue, moonlight filtering through trees, the exit. I burst through the tunnel mouth like I was being born again. The cold broke. The sound returned. Wind, rustling leaves, my own heartbeat crashing in my ears. I stumbled into the gravel, dropped to my knees. Behind me the tunnel stood quiet, still, empty, as if nothing had ever lived in there at all. The silence didn't last. That first night I barely slept. I stayed awake with every light on, curled under a blanket that felt too thin, in a room that suddenly felt too open. My ears rang with phantom echoes. My skin remembered the cold that hadn't come from air. I told myself it was over, that it had stayed in the tunnel. But I was wrong. The scream came again, the next night. Not outside, not in a dream, inside my apartment. It was exactly 12:03 a.m. I remember because I'd been staring at the clock, waiting for sleep to come, when the sound tore through the stillness like a blade through glass. A scream, high, raw, female, not from any one place, just there, filling the space. I leapt from the bed, turned on every light, searched the apartment, nothing, no intruder, no neighbors in distress, just silence, like the sound had never happened at all, until the next night. 12:03, again, always the same, the scream, then the silence. I tried recording it, but nothing came through on playback, just static, a low hum that deepened around the same timestamp, a gap of noise that felt more like a hole in sound than sound itself. I stopped sleeping. I left lights on, set alarms, played music to drown out the quiet. It didn't help, because the scream wasn't alone anymore. After the first week, it changed. At first, it came alone. Then it was followed by whispers, faint, wet, close. At 12:03, the scream would come. And just as it ended, I'd hear the softest voice, like breath across my ear, whispering something I couldn't fully understand. But one word always came clear. You. Last night, I tried something different. I turned off all the lights, sat in the dark, waited. When the clock struck 12:03, the scream erupted again, louder than ever, shaking the picture frames on the wall. Then came the whisper. But this time I heard it fully. I know you. I didn't sleep after that. And today, when I got home from work, I noticed something on the floor just inside my apartment. A matchstick, unburnt, dry, clean, lying exactly where my bed meets the wall. I never brought any matches back with me. I never took anything from the tunnel. But something had followed anyway. Something had chosen me. And every night since, I wake up at the same time, with the echo of that scream still rattling the glass, and a voice I can now hear even before I open my eyes. It doesn't shout. It doesn't scream. It whispers, soft and slow, right by my ear. Come back. It was a Tuesday night, quiet, uneventful, the kind of evening that leaves no trace. My daughter had fallen asleep earlier than usual, curled up like a question mark under the blanket, her small hand still clutching the edge of her favorite toy. A soft, smiling bear, the kind that sings lullabies when you squeeze its paw. Bright red bow, plastic speaker stitched into the chest, voice chip programmed with a half-dozen cheerful phrases. It had come with batteries pre-installed, and like most toys that talk, it never shut up at the right time. I had meant to replace the batteries weeks ago, but instead I'd done what every tired parent does, pulled the flap open at the back and removed them altogether. Silence. Blessed, mechanical silence. That night, the house held that rare kind of calm only young parents understand. No crying, no humming from the baby monitor. Just the tick of the kitchen clock and the occasional creak of old floorboards settling into themselves. I was in the hallway when it happened. From the nursery, through the half-closed door, I heard it. A voice, high-pitched, mechanical. I see you. It was soft, almost sing-song, not loud, not aggressive, just wrong. I stopped cold, waited, no sound, no movement. I pushed the door open the rest of the way. The room looked normal. Her crib, the rocking chair, the mobile above her head turning slowly, silently, caught in a lazy current from the ceiling fan, and the bear, the one without batteries, sitting at the foot of the crib. Exactly where she'd left it. Its plastic eyes staring straight ahead. I picked it up slowly, turned it over, still no batteries, no warmth, no hum of hidden circuits. Dead, utterly dead. I pressed the paw. Nothing. I shook it once. Still nothing. I stood there, holding it like something fragile, listening for any sound at all. The silence returned. I placed it back in the crib, careful not to wake her, and backed out of the room. I tried to explain it away. Residual charge, a trick of memory. Maybe I'd imagined the sound altogether. But even as I climbed into bed that night, a pit formed in my stomach. Not because of what the bear had said, but because the voice hadn't come from the crib. It had come from across the room. I kept the bear off the crib the next night, tucked it inside the top drawer of her dresser, beneath a pile of extra blankets and a small stuffed rabbit she never played with. I didn't tell myself it was cursed or haunted. I didn't believe in those things. I just didn't want to hear that voice again. But I did. At 2:14 a.m. it came not from the drawer, not from the crib, but from the hallway just outside her room. Moors. Mia, I see you. I froze. I had just drifted into the kind of shallow sleep new parents survive on. But the moment I heard it, I was upright. My heart punched against my ribs. I didn't breathe. Her name. We had never programmed the toy. It wasn't one of those fancy ones that sync with an app and call your kid by name. It was mass-produced, generic phrases. Let's sing a song. You're my best friend. Never Mia. Never her name. I rose slowly, feet cold against the floor, and crept to the hallway. Nothing. No lights on. No sound. I opened the nursery door. She was still asleep. The drawer was still shut, but something in the air had changed. The scent, the weight, like someone had been standing there a moment ago. I opened the drawer with shaking hands. The bear sat on top of the folded blankets, head tilted slightly to one side, like it had just settled back into place. The next morning I checked the bear again. Still no batteries, no circuitry damage, no speaker wiring exposed. I opened the stitching on the back, expecting to find something, anything, a second chip, a receiver, a prank someone had installed. But there was nothing, just stuffing, and a thin layer of dust that told me no one had touched it since I did. Except someone had, because that night the voice came again. I missed you, Mia. This time from the baby monitor. The monitor has no speaker function. It only transmits sound one way, from her room to mine. The bear wasn't in the crib. It wasn't even in the drawer. It was sitting on the floor. upright, facing the door. Her name never sounded threatening. That's what terrified me most. It sounded familiar, practiced, affectionate, like it had been saying her name for a long time and was finally being heard. The next night, I set up my phone to record. I placed it on the shelf above the crib, screen dimmed, mic facing outward. A simple voice memo app, nothing complicated. I didn't want video. I didn't want to see what was happening, just the sound. That would be enough. I laid Mia down at her usual time. The bear was back in the drawer, or at least I thought it was. I checked twice, tucked it deep under the blankets, pushed the drawer fully shut, locked the nursery door behind me, and waited. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch in the living room, eyes on the ceiling, heart beating too fast to rest. At 2:08 a.m., I heard the click. The baby monitor lit up, no crying, no rustling, just that click, the sound of wood shifting. A drawer, maybe, or a door. Then silence. I waited another hour before I crept back in, careful not to wake her. The room was quiet, the crib untouched. And there, once again, sitting near the door, the bear. Propped upright, paws resting in its lap facing the wall, as if ashamed, or waiting. I picked it up with 2 fingers, holding it like it might bite. Still no batteries, still no weight, just fluff and plastic. I checked the drawer, still closed. The lock on the door, still engaged. I took the phone and left the room. The next morning, I played the recording. The first 2 hours were uneventful. Shifting sheets, soft breathing. Then, just after 2:10 a.m., it started. A faint scratch, like fabric against wood. Then a soft thump, and a voice, not loud, not distant, right beside the mic. "Why did you put me in the dark?" The voice was wrong, too low, distorted at the edges, like an old cassette played backward. And then came the laughter. Childlike, airy, but too slow, too hollow, as if something had practiced mimicking it but hadn't quite gotten it right. After that came the movement, a soft dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I scrubbed forward in the audio, breath shallow. At 2:23 a.m. there was a new sound, barely audible, a whisper. "He's here." I stopped the playback, deleted the file. But the sound wouldn't leave my ears. That night, Mia woke up screaming, her finger pointed toward the closet, and the bear, the one I had locked away, was sitting on her pillow, face pressed to her cheek. I burned it. I dropped it onto the floor, backed away, and that's when it spoke. No lights, no buttons pressed, just words, low, clear. "You can't leave me." I didn't scream, didn't move. The bear tilted slightly, its paw twitched, and then it laughed, a short, broken giggle that scraped across the inside of my skull like a nail dragging over tile. That night, I locked it in a metal toolbox, sealed the box, put it in the garage. But at 2:14 a.m., the baby monitor clicked on. And I heard Mia's voice, soft, afraid. "He's back." I ran to her room. She was sitting up, pointing toward the door. The toolbox was at the foot of her crib. Lid open. Empty. I don't know where it hides now. Some nights I find it on the kitchen counter, other times in the back seat of the car. Always clean, always watching. And every night, as the clock ticks past 2, it says something new. Sometimes just my name. Sometimes hers. And sometimes we're already inside. Everyone who grew up near Mill Creek knew about the tunnel. It wasn't marked on most maps, just a weathered opening carved into the hillside beyond the old quarry road, swallowed by trees and moss. You could drive right past it and never know it was there, unless someone told you. Someone always did. The story went like this. If you entered the tunnel at midnight, stood exactly in the center and struck a single match, you'd hear a scream. Not just any scream. A raw, soul-ripping wail that rose from the stone itself. A sound that didn't echo, didn't fade, didn't belong to anything human. They said it came from a girl. No one could agree on her name or how she died. Some claimed she'd been set on fire by her father. Others said she was trapped during a flood and burned alive when lightning hit a gas pipe. One version insisted she was never real at all, just the echo of pain the tunnel had absorbed from decades of fear. But everyone agreed on the same rule. You don't strike the match. Kids went there all the time. To drink, to dare each other, to laugh too loudly so they wouldn't hear anything else. I was one of them. The first time I saw it, I was 12. My older cousin pointed at it from the edge of the trees, told me the story in a low voice meant to scare me. I pretended it didn't work, but I didn't sleep that night. Years passed. People left. New houses went up. Streetlights got closer to the edge of the forest. But the tunnel stayed dark, and the story stayed with me. I thought about it often, not because I believed it, but because I didn't like that I almost did. So I made a decision. One night in November, I took a flashlight, a box of matches, and a backpack with water and a blanket, just in case. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need an audience. I needed to know. The trail to the tunnel was still there, overgrown, but familiar. My boots sank into the soft earth as I walked. It was colder than I expected. No wind, no animals, just the crackle of dead leaves underfoot and the sound of my own breath. When I reached the entrance, I stopped. The tunnel's mouth yawned open, jagged bricks blackened with age and soot. The air inside felt still, like whatever breeze had followed me in had stopped at the threshold watch. 11:59 p.m. One more minute. Then I stepped inside. The inside of the tunnel felt wrong. It wasn't just cold, it was heavy, like walking into a space that had been sealed off from time itself. The floor beneath my boots was damp and uneven, littered with stones slick with moss and mold. The air had a taste, metallic, stale, and strangely sour, like rust soaked into bone. I moved slowly, flashlight aimed at the ground, the beam stretching ahead like a thread I didn't want to let go of. The walls were close, too close. They curved inward ever so slightly, as if the tunnel was squeezing in around me. My footsteps echoed in strange patterns. Sometimes they bounced right back, sometimes they vanished into silence like something was swallowing them. I counted the steps, 28 to the center. I knew this because someone had written it online years ago. Local legend, urban myth. You take 28 paces in from the tunnel mouth and you'll be standing in the center, the place where she screamed. I reached that spot, stopped, turned off my flashlight. Total darkness. No moonlight made it in here. No stars, no sounds, only the silence of something ancient holding its breath. My watch vibrated once on my wrist. 12 a.m., right on time. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the matchbox. My fingers felt too clumsy. I struck the first match. It flared weakly at first, then caught, its flame steady and thin. The light pushed back the dark just a few feet, enough to see the damp walls glistening with moisture, the warped bricks curling at the edges like they'd been melted long ago. I held the match out in front of me. The flame hissed softly, and for a moment, nothing happened. No sound, no wind, just me, standing in the belly of something I no longer believed was just the tunnel. Then the temperature dropped. So fast it felt like falling into ice water. My lungs seized. The match shivered in my hand but didn't go out. And that's when I heard it, the scream. It didn't come from ahead of me or behind. It came from everywhere. From the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor beneath my boots. It wasn't a voice, it was pain turned into sound, high, raw and endless. I felt it in my teeth, in my spine, in the soft parts of me I couldn't name. It didn't echo, it pressed, wrapped around my head like hands trying to crush it. The match went out, darkness returned, but the scream didn't stop, it just kept going, like she had never stopped burning. The scream kept going, longer than it should have. Longer than any lungs could hold. Not rising or falling, just a single constant wail, pitched high and sharp enough to cut the inside of my head. I tried covering my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, in the marrow, in the teeth, in the place just behind the eyes where fear nests. My legs went numb, my mouth hung open, breath shallow and fast, as if my body was trying to match a rhythm it couldn't find. The air was thick and wrong. Each inhale felt like sucking in ash. I tried to move, back toward the entrance. The tunnel had changed, or I had. I turned where I knew the opening should be, where I'd counted 28 steps from. Nothing. No light, no air shift, just more tunnel. The bricks looked stretched, like they'd been pulled, warped and reshaped by invisible hands. The curves no longer matched. The lines had lost their symmetry. It felt like standing inside a throat. Breathing, tightening. I stumbled forward, one arm stretched out, trying to feel the wall. My fingers brushed the surface and it was warm, not wet, not slimy, just warm like skin. I jerked my hand back, heart in my throat. The scream was changing. Not louder, closer. It no longer sounded far away, buried beneath stone. It was behind me, then beside me, then inside me. like my bones were singing along against their will. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. A silence dropped so heavy I staggered. The absence of sound rang louder than the scream itself. The pressure in the tunnel shifted again. But this time something else changed too. A presence. I wasn't alone. Something was in there with me. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The same way you feel someone watching from a cracked door in a dark hallway. It was close enough to touch me, close enough to whisper, and it did. Soft, dry, too close. You shouldn't have lit it. I ran, didn't think, didn't breathe. I sprinted into the dark, no direction, no logic, just the instinct to get away. My feet hit uneven stones. My shoulder slammed into a wall. Pain flared, but I kept moving through a tunnel that refused to end. And behind me, not a scream, but footsteps. I don't remember getting out. One moment I was running, crashing into walls that breathed, chased by a scream that had no source. And the next, I was in my room. Shoes muddy, clothes damp, phone battery dead. No missed calls, no timestamps, nothing to prove where I had been. I should have felt safe. I didn't. That night I barely slept. My ears still rang as if some part of the scream had fused into my hearing. My chest felt tight. The air in the apartment felt thinner. I told myself it was adrenaline, a lingering nightmare, the body catching up to the mind. But then came the sound. 12:03 a.m. The first night. A shriek, not loud, not external, but inside the house. Sharp, distant, almost like it was behind the walls. I bolted upright in bed. Everything was still, the hallway empty, the windows locked, no alarms, no explanation. I stayed awake until dawn. The next night it came again, same time, same sound. Except now there was something else, a whisper just beneath the scream, faint, torn apart by static, too warped to understand but not unfamiliar. I played white noise as I slept, left music on, set alarms, nothing drowned it out. And worse, it started moving. Some nights the scream came from the hallway, others from the bathroom vent, once from directly underneath the bed. Always at 12:03, never a second late. I bought a recorder, let it run through the night. When I played it back the next morning, there was no scream. Just 5 seconds of silence. Then we see you now. I stopped listening after that, but the scream never stopped. It visited me every night, and soon it started appearing in my dreams. Only now I wasn't inside the tunnel. The tunnel was inside the apartment, a twisting, endless hallway beneath the floorboards, brick and stone and breath and shadow. And at the center, the flame, still lit, still waiting, still screaming. I tried to move out, but something always pulled me back. Paperwork delayed, offers fell through, lock jammed, car wouldn't start, and always at 12:03, the walls remembered. Tonight, I found something new, scratched into the wood just beneath the nightstand. A single word, shaky, carved deep, stay. And now, as the clock blinks over to 12:02, I can already feel it starting. The air thinning, the pressure rising, the scream forming in the pipes. It doesn't live in the tunnel anymore. It lives here with me. It was one of those rare nights when everything was quiet. No dishes in the sink, no crying from the nursery, no flickering hallway light begging for a bulb change, just the soft whir of the baby monitor beside me and the steady tick of the kitchen clock. Mia had fallen asleep early. A small miracle. She clutched her usual companion, a tan plush bear with oversized button eyes and a red ribbon at the neck, the kind that plays lullabies and says generic phrases when you press its paw. A gift from someone at the baby shower, mass-produced, cheerful, and, lately, too noisy for bedtime. I had removed the batteries 2 nights earlier, not because it was faulty, because it wouldn't shut up. It had started going off randomly, in the middle of the night, during naps. Sometimes when no one was in the room. Just one of those glitches, I figured. Cheap electronics and bad wiring. Still, it unsettled me, and I didn't like waking up to robotic singing at 3 a.m., so I popped the battery cover and left it empty. That night, after brushing my teeth and checking the locks, I peeked into her room. She was sound asleep, arms stretched out, tiny breaths fogging the nightlight glow. The bear sat beside her, still, silent. I left the door cracked an inch, enough to hear if she stirred, and padded down the hallway. 10 minutes later, I was on the couch. Lights off, TV on low, almost dozing, and then it spoke. Not from the TV, not from the monitor, from the hallway. A child's toy voice, except not quite right. "I see you." Soft, mechanical, but slower than usual, drawn out, too deliberate. I froze. The baby monitor remained dark. No movement, no sound from Mia's room. I stood up, checked the hallway. Nothing. I moved to the nursery door and opened it fully. She was still asleep, the bear still beside her. Its eyes caught the nightlight just enough to gleam faintly. But it hadn't moved. It couldn't have. I picked it up, turned it over. No weight, no warmth, no batteries. Still, I felt something cold in my chest. Not fear, not yet, but the creeping sense that I hadn't imagined the voice, and that whatever had spoken hadn't been trying to wake her. I should have thrown it away that night, but I didn't. I told myself it was just a leftover glitch, some buried charge still working through the circuits. Harmless, annoying, nothing worth panicking over. So I put the bear in the drawer beneath Mia's crib, beneath folded clothes and old baby blankets. I closed it gently, turned the nightlight down a notch, and left the door open just a crack. The next day I forgot about it, almost. Until that evening, while I was brushing Mia's hair before bed, she said something that made my stomach drop. She looked at the empty space beside her pillow and mumbled, half asleep. "Bear said my name." I paused, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Not excited, not confused, just stating it, like it had happened before, like it had happened again. I didn't press her. I just tucked her in, kissed her goodnight, and quietly opened the drawer beneath the crib. The bear was gone. I checked the floor, the toy bin, under the bed. Nothing. I eventually found it the next morning, sitting on the stairs, propped up like someone had placed it there on purpose, facing upward toward the bedrooms. I didn't say anything, just picked it up with 2 fingers and shoved it into the closet in the hallway, locked the door. That night, just after 2 a.m., I woke up without knowing why. No noise, no movement, just an overwhelming sense that something had shifted. I sat up, listened. The baby monitor clicked on, that faint, mechanical pop that always precedes sound. But there was no crying, only static. And then through the fuzz, a voice. Mia. Not shouted, not sung, just spoken. Soft, like a lullaby. But it wasn't my voice, and it wasn't hers. It was the same strange mechanical tone I'd heard in the hallway 2 nights before. Too slow, too clear, too aware. I bolted out of bed, nearly tripping over myself in the dark. The nursery door creaked open before I reached it. Mia was sitting upright in her crib, wide-eyed, pointing at the wall. Her lips moved, soundless. Then her arm lowered to the floor. The bear was there, sitting against the dresser, its head tilted slightly, as if it had been listening the whole time. I started recording on the 3rd night. There was no choice. Whatever was happening, it was escalating, and I needed to know it wasn't all in my head, that I wasn't sleep-deprived and spiraling. I placed my phone just inside the nursery door, microphone facing in, screen dimmed, set to capture anything between midnight and 4 a.m. Then I sat in the hallway with my back against the wall, and I waited. I must have dozed off sometime after 2. When I woke, the hallway was quiet. The light from under Mia's door was unchanged. No sound. Nothing unusual. But when I checked the recording the next morning, I stopped breathing halfway through playback. It started with static, low, consistent. Then soft shifting, fabric, the creak of wood, like Mia turning in her crib. Then came the voice. "He's not listening tonight. Not mine, not hers. Same as before, that slow, deliberate mechanical tone, distorted just enough to sound broken. But this time it was followed by another voice. Different, fainter, lower, not robotic, not human. A wet whisper, almost a growl. Not yet. Let her sleep." I paused the recording, rewound it, listened again. My ears rang with something deeper than fear. There were 2 voices. One I'd heard before, the toy, and one I hadn't. Or maybe I had, but not with ears. I scrolled forward in the file. A series of taps followed. Rhythmic, not random. Then faint thuds, like something small jumping or stepping across the floor. And then, "This one's too small. We'll wait for the big one." Silence. A long stretch of nothing. Then a final phrase, spoken almost playfully. "He's almost ready." I deleted the file, then emptied the trash, then factory reset my phone. It didn't feel like protection, just panic. That night I moved the bear to the garage, sealed it in a box, taped it shut, wrapped it in 2 layers of trash bags and buried it beneath a pile of forgotten boxes. Mia slept peacefully. Until 3:12 a.m. when I woke up to the monitor glowing softly. No crying, no movement, just her small voice whispering into the dark. He said you shouldn't hide him. I burned it, wrapped it in towels soaked with lighter fluid, drove 45 minutes to the riverbend where no one went after dark, and set it on fire beneath the overpass. I watched the flames take hold, slow at first, then angry. The plastic hissed, the fabric blackened and curled. I didn't leave until there was nothing left but ash and melted wire. No voice, no laughter, no whisper, gone. For the first time in weeks, I slept. No static on the monitor, no sound in the hallway, no soft taps against the floorboards at 3 a.m. The silence felt like a blessing. Then, 5 nights later, a package appeared on my doorstep. No label, no return address, just plain brown paper, sealed with clear tape. My stomach turned the moment I saw it. I brought it inside with trembling hands, set it on the table, stared at it for a long time. Eventually I opened it. Beneath the crumpled paper and packing peanuts was the bear. Whole, clean, untouched, like it had never burned. Its ribbon was tied perfectly. The stitching I had torn open weeks ago was intact. No sign of fire, no scent of smoke, just soft fur, and 2 glassy eyes that didn't blink. I stepped back. The bear fell sideways in the box, and that's when it spoke. No warning, no prompt, no batteries, just a voice, soft and quiet. You tried to leave. A pause. You can't. I backed away. The bear sat motionless. Then slowly its head tilted, just slightly, as if it were listening for something deeper than sound. I threw it into the trash that night, took the whole bin to the curb and watched the garbage truck crush it the next morning. But that didn't matter, because later that afternoon, Mia handed me something. Smiling, laughing, a gift, she said, wrapped in tissue paper. I opened it. It was the bear, smaller this time, but the same glass eyes, the same red ribbon, and when I touched it, it whispered, "She hears us now." That night, Mia didn't sleep. She sat up in bed, talking to someone I couldn't see. When I asked her who it was, she pointed to the corner of the room, smiled and whispered, "You'll hear him too, soon." I've always been a light sleeper. Not the kind who jumps at every creak in the night, but the kind who notices when the wind changes or when the hum of the fridge stops for just a second too long. Maybe that's why I chose to live alone. No roommates to stir me with their late-night snacking or midnight phone calls. Just me, my books, and the soft hum of a quiet apartment. My place isn't big. Just a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a modest building on the edge of town. It's the kind of area where neighbors nod politely, but don't ask too many questions. The front door faces an open corridor with a few potted plants, and the only real noise comes from the occasional dog barking or a car pulling in too fast. I liked the silence. I liked the routine. Every night, I'd lock the deadbolt, check the windows, and pull the curtains closed. I'd make a cup of tea, brush my teeth, and read for half an hour before turning off the lights. It was a system that kept me grounded, a rhythm that made me feel safe. Then one morning, everything shifted. It was a Wednesday, I remember that clearly. I had woken up groggy just past 7 a.m. and shuffled to the door to grab the small bag of trash I'd left outside the night before. I opened the door and reached down, and that's when I saw it. A single Polaroid photograph. It was lying face up on the welcome mat, perfectly centered, as if placed with care. At first, I thought it was junk mail or a lost photo from another apartment. But when I picked it up, my hand froze. It was me, sleeping. The photo was slightly grainy with that soft blur common to instant film, but it was unmistakably me, lying on my side, blanket half draped over my body. My face was relaxed, eyes closed, mouth slightly parted in sleep. The most disturbing part? The angle. It was taken from inside the room, from a corner where no furniture sat, a blind spot I'd never paid attention to. It wasn't through a window, and it wasn't from the hallway. It was from within. The lighting matched the faint glow of my nightstand lamp that I usually left on. My closet door was ajar, just like I'd left it. Even the book I'd fallen asleep reading was there, open on the edge of the bed. I stood there barefoot in the doorway, holding the photo in my hand, heart thudding loud enough to drown out the world. I scanned the hallway, no one, no noise, no note, just the photo. I went back inside and locked the door. Then I locked it again. I checked every window, all locked. No cracks, no signs of tampering. The apartment was exactly as I had left it, except someone had been inside. Someone had stood there while I slept, close enough to take a picture, and then left without a trace. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I didn't want to sound paranoid, not when there was no break-in, no damage, just a photo. But something had already broken. The sense of safety I'd built up brick by brick, night after night, had cracked. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see that Polaroid. The photo sat on my kitchen table for the rest of that day. I didn't know what to do with it. I kept glancing at it between sips of coffee and empty stares. I even considered burning it, but something told me not to. Like if I destroyed it, I'd be erasing the only proof that something was truly wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I lay in bed with all the lights on, TV humming softly in the background. I told myself it was just a prank, that someone had managed to get an old picture of me somehow, photoshopped it, printed it on a Polaroid for dramatic effect, and left it there to mess with me. But that didn't make sense. No one had a photo of me sleeping. I lived alone. I hadn't had guests in months. I never posted that kind of thing online. Around 3 a.m., I gave up pretending and sat on the couch, staring at the front door like it might open on its own. It didn't. The next morning, I told myself to get a grip. I called the building manager, asked if there were any security cameras in the corridor outside my door. He said no. They'd been out of order for months. Figures. That day at work, I couldn't focus. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from an unknown number or a call that would never come. But there was nothing. Just silence. Whatever had happened the night before, it felt like the world had moved on. Like the incident existed only in my little corner of reality. When I got home that evening, my heart stopped. There was another Polaroid. This one was angled differently, lower from near the floor, like someone had crouched beside the bed. It showed the same scene. Me asleep, blanket slightly shifted, book on the edge of the mattress. But in this one, my hand was outstretched as if reaching for something in my sleep. I hadn't remembered doing that. And yet there it was. I checked everything again. Windows, doors, even inside the closet and under the bed. I moved furniture, crawled into the crawl space above the bathroom, nothing. No signs of forced entry. No misplaced items. Whoever was doing this, they were careful. Too careful. I bought a camera the next day. Not a cheap baby monitor, a proper motion-activated security camera with night vision. I installed it discreetly, angled toward my bedroom. I even bought a second one and placed it in the hallway just outside my door. That night I forced myself to sleep. Morning came, and so did the third photo. It was lying on my pillow. I didn't find it on the welcome mat this time. I found it when I opened my eyes. There, resting beside my head, was the now familiar white border of a Polaroid photograph. I stared at it without moving. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. In this one, I was facing the camera. Eyes closed, lips slightly parted, and a shadow across my neck. A long, narrow shadow, like the outline of someone standing over me. I ran to my laptop to check the security footage. The file was gone. The camera had recorded nothing, or someone had deleted it. I didn't remember dreaming. I didn't remember waking. I didn't remember anything at all. But someone had been in that room, again. And now they were getting closer. I didn't go to work that day. How could I? My hands wouldn't stop shaking long enough to brush my teeth, let alone sit through morning meetings and pretend everything was fine. I called in sick, though I didn't recognize the voice that came out of me when I left the message. It sounded distant, hollow, like I was already somewhere else. I spent the day locked inside, blinds drawn tight, every light in the apartment switched on. I checked the hallway camera again, hoping maybe I'd missed something, a flicker, a movement, anything. But no, the files were gone. Both cameras had recorded nothing between midnight and 5 a.m. The system logs showed no signs of corruption or malfunction. It was like someone had manually accessed the system, deleted the footage, and closed the door behind them without leaving a single trace, and I had no memory of it. The fourth Polaroid came that night. This time I was ready, or at least I thought I was. I stayed awake with a knife under my pillow and my phone clutched in one hand. Every few minutes I glanced at the bedroom door, half expecting it to swing open, but hours passed and nothing happened. At some point, I don't remember when, sleep won. I woke up in daylight. groggy, with a stiff neck and a dull ache behind my eyes. And there it was, pinned to the wall above my bed with a single thumbtack, the fourth photo. It was taken from above, a high angle, like from the ceiling. My body lay curled on the mattress, and above me, almost blending into the shadows of the ceiling fan, was a shape. Vague, blurred, but undeniably humanoid. It wasn't facing the camera. It was looking at me. I vomited in the sink. That afternoon, I brought the photos to the police. I expected them to at least raise an eyebrow. Maybe ask if I had enemies, ex-lovers, unstable friends. Instead, they glanced at the photos like I was showing them pictures of my cat. "Looks like you've got a stalker," one of them mumbled, barely lifting his head. They took my statement, said they'd look into it. I left with a weak promise and a phone number to call if anything escalated. It already had. Back at home, I ripped open the walls looking for hidden cameras. I checked vents, light fixtures, even the toilet tank. Nothing. Not even a single misplaced screw. I moved my bed away from the wall, slept on the floor, changed the locks. That night, I didn't sleep. Not even a minute. But in the morning, a fifth photo. This one was different. It wasn't of me sleeping. It was of me, standing. Back turned, in the kitchen, from behind, like someone had been right there with me the day before. My posture, my shirt, the cup I was holding, everything was exact. Except for one thing. In the photo, my head was tilted. And behind me, in the blurry reflection of the microwave door, was a second figure, unmistakably tall, pale, faceless. I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding so loudly it hurt. I didn't remember anyone being there, but the photo didn't lie. Something was in my apartment, and it wasn't just watching me sleep anymore. I stopped pretending after the fifth photo. There was no more reaching for logic, no more desperate searches for hidden cameras or rational explanations. Something had entered my life, something I couldn't see, couldn't fight, and definitely couldn't understand. And it was getting bolder. That night I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't even sit down. I just stood in the center of the room, clutching a flashlight and a hammer like a fool waiting for an earthquake. Hours passed. Nothing. I kept glancing at the clock. 1 a.m., 2:15, 3:03. Then at exactly 3:33 a.m., the power cut out. Not with a flicker, not like a storm outside. Just gone. Instant silence. Even the refrigerator stopped humming. My apartment was suddenly submerged in black, thick and complete, as if the walls had vanished and I was suspended in a void. And then, the sound. It wasn't loud, just a soft click, like a camera shutter, followed by a slow exhale, not mine. I turned, swinging the flashlight wildly. The beam cut through nothing, no movement, no shapes, just my ragged breathing and the blood pounding in my ears. I backed into the corner, gripping the hammer so tight my knuckles went numb. And then I saw them, on the floor. 10 new Polaroids, perfectly arranged semicircle around me, all face down. I didn't touch them, not at first. I just stared, too afraid to move. But some part of me, the curious, broken part, finally reached down and flipped the first one over. It was me again, sleeping. The same pose, same angle, except this time my eyes were open. Photo 2, I was sitting upright, staring at the camera, mouth open like I was screaming, but the image made no sound. 3, my back was arched off the bed, hands reaching out as if trying to claw away from something just beyond the frame. 4, the figure was back. Closer now, almost touching me. By the 10th photo, I wasn't in it anymore. It was just the bedroom, empty, quiet. And in the far corner, standing with its back to the lens, the figure. Tall, still, almost human. But wrong. And in its hand it held a camera. The power came back around sunrise. I packed a bag and left without brushing my teeth, without even changing my shirt. I didn't care. I drove until I couldn't feel my hands on the wheel anymore, until I found a roadside motel with no cameras and no questions. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on the mattress staring at the ceiling, expecting something, anything to move. Nothing did. But in the morning, tucked gently beneath my motel room door, was a single Polaroid. It showed me asleep in that same motel bed, and behind me, just barely visible in the sliver of mirror near the window, a pale, faceless figure. Watching. I don't live anywhere for too long now. I leave before the next photo arrives. But I know it's out there. I know it's following me. And sometimes, just before sleep pulls me under, I swear I hear the soft click of a shutter in the dark. And I wonder, when I wake up, will I still be the one in the picture? It was almost midnight when I left the diner. The night air was cold, the kind that wraps around your skin and clings to your bones. My breath came out in white wisps, and the streetlights buzzed softly above me, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalks. The streets were nearly deserted. Just the occasional flicker of a porch light or the faint rumble of a car in the distance. I had worked late, longer than usual. A new hire had messed up the closing shift, and I had to stay behind to fix it. My legs ached, my eyes burned, and all I wanted was to get home, take a shower, and forget the day had ever happened. The last bus was supposed to come at 11:45. I remember glancing at the small rusted clock mounted near the stop, 11:46. I thought I'd missed it. But then, as if on cue, the headlights appeared at the end of the street, cutting through the mist. It pulled up slowly, its brakes hissing like a sigh. The bus was old, not the newer model with digital signs and smooth suspension. This one looked like it belonged to another decade. The route number was barely visible behind scratched plastic. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. There were only a few passengers, 3, maybe 4. All sitting silently, heads low, faces half hidden in the dim overhead lights. No one looked up, no one moved. The driver was an older man, worn cap, thick glasses, deep lines on his face like he'd spent too many lifetimes behind the wheel. He didn't say a word, just gave a small nod as I dropped my coins into the fare box. I found a seat halfway down the aisle, near the window. The warmth of the bus wrapped around me, a welcome contrast to the chill outside. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, I stared out into the night. Empty streets blurred past, familiar yet strange in the half-light. The motion of the bus lulled me, and despite my efforts to stay alert, my eyelids grew heavy. The quiet hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of the wheels were hypnotic. I leaned against the window and let myself drift. It couldn't have been long, maybe 10 minutes, when I opened my eyes again. The bus was slowing down, and I saw the street leading to my apartment complex coming into view. I rose, thanked the driver quietly as I passed, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The bus pulled away, taillights fading into the night fog. I watched it until it disappeared around a corner. Everything seemed normal, but there was something off. The air felt too still, the street too quiet. I couldn't place it at the time, just a strange tension in the pit of my stomach, like I'd just walked out of a dream I didn't remember falling into. I brushed it off. I was tired, overworked. I told myself I was imagining things. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I would ever see that bus. Because according to the records, that route never ran that night. And the man who drove it, he died 3 years ago. The next morning started like any other. I woke up late, still groggy from the night before. My memories of the bus ride were hazy, like a dream remembered only in fragments. The hum of the engine, the quiet passengers, the way the driver never looked directly at me. I chalked the unease up to exhaustion. Something stuck with me. That bus didn't feel right. It was too old, too quiet, and no one else had gotten off with me, even though I was sure I wasn't the only one on board. At lunch, I mentioned it to Carla, my co-worker. "I didn't think that route even runs that late anymore," she said, frowning. "Did they bring it back?" I shrugged. "It showed up right on time. Old bus, kind of beat up. The driver was weird, but nothing dangerous, just quiet." Carla tilted her head. "What route was it?" "Route 17, I said. "The same one I always take home when I work late." She looked confused. "Route 17 hasn't run past 10 p.m. since, 2 years ago. They cut back because of budget stuff. Remember? You used to complain about it." That stopped me cold. I laughed it off awkwardly, but her words replayed in my mind for the rest of the day. When my shift ended, I didn't head home right away. Instead, I walked back to the bus stop. It was nearly the same time, 11:45 p.m. I waited and waited. No bus came. I stayed until almost 1 a.m. standing under the flickering yellow streetlight, trying to convince myself I had simply imagined the whole thing, that I had somehow caught a different bus, a rare late-night one-off, or misread the route number in my half-asleep days. But I knew what I saw. The next day, I called the city's public transit hotline. I asked casually about Route 17's schedule. The woman on the other end sounded bored. "Route 17 stops running at 10 sharp. Hasn't had a late-night loop in over 3 years." What about special runs, like emergency coverage or substitutes? She sighed. Nope, not for that route. I paused, then asked, do you keep records of operators? Drivers? There was a click-clack of a keyboard. What day? 2 nights ago. Another pause. There was no driver assigned to Route 17 that night, she said, and no buses from that line were dispatched past 9:50. I thanked her and hung up, but I couldn't let it go. Something inside me needed to know. That evening, I searched online for anything about Route 17. After a while, buried beneath transit complaints and budget news, I found an old local article, dated 3 years ago. Bus driver dies in late-night crash. The photo attached made my blood run cold. It was him, the man who drove the bus. Same glasses, same worn cap, same expressionless face. His name was William Archer. He had died while driving Route 17, veered off the road into a ditch. Multiple passengers had perished with him. No one ever figured out why the crash happened. No brakes, no black box malfunction, just silence. The article ended with a quote from a survivor. He wasn't speaking. He just kept driving. Even after we passed my stop, like he didn't want to stop at all. I sat there in my dark living room, the light of the screen flickering across my face, and realized something horrifying. I had taken a ride on a bus that wasn't supposed to exist, and its driver had been dead for 3 years. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the driver's face. Not horrifying, not twisted or monstrous, just blank. Hollow, as if nothing lived behind those eyes anymore. That emptiness haunted me more than any nightmare could. The next few days passed in a blur. I kept going to work, nodding through conversations, pretending everything was normal. But I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. My co-workers noticed, of course. Carla asked if I was sick. I told her I was just tired. I didn't tell her about the dreams. They started subtly at first. I'd find myself back on that bus in my sleep, sitting in the same seat by the window, the same dim lighting, the same soft hum of the engine. But in the dreams, no one else was there. No passengers, no driver, just me. And the bus moved anyway. Always forward. Always into deeper darkness. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. Heart pounding like I'd just sprinted miles. But the worst part was how real it all felt. The rocking of the wheels beneath me, the cold glass of the window, the sticky vinyl of the seat under my palms. It was like I hadn't been dreaming at all. On the 5th night after the ride, I did something I told myself I wouldn't do. I went back to the bus stop. I needed to know if it would come again. The air was colder this time. Sharp. Still. I stood under the yellow light, arms wrapped tight around myself, watching the empty road stretch into silence. 11:30, 11:45, midnight, nothing. I turned to leave, relief and disappointment mixing uneasily in my chest, when I heard it, far off, a familiar rumble. Not loud, not close, but unmistakable. The sound of a bus engine. I froze. My body wanted to run, but something held me in place. The sound grew louder, then faded. Then silence again. Nothing came around the corner. No headlights. No vehicle, just the sound and then nothing. And its driver had been dead for 3 years. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the driver's face. Not horrifying, not twisted or monstrous. Just blank. Hollow, as if nothing lived behind those eyes anymore. That emptiness haunted me more than any nightmare could. The next few days passed in a blur. I kept going to work, nodding through conversations, pretending everything was normal. But I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. My co-workers noticed, of course. Carla asked if I was sick. I told her I was just tired. I didn't tell her about the dreams. They started subtly at first. I'd find myself back on that bus in my sleep, sitting in the same seat by the window, the same dim lighting, the same soft hum of the engine. But in the dreams, no one else was there. No passengers, no driver, just me. And the bus moved anyway, always forward, always into deeper darkness. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like I'd just sprinted miles. But the worst part was how real it all felt. The rocking of the wheels beneath me, the cold glass of the window, the sticky vinyl of the seat under my palms. It was like I hadn't been dreaming at all. On the 5th night after the ride, I did something I told myself I wouldn't do. I went back to the bus stop. I needed to know if it would come again. The air was colder this time. Sharp. Still. I stood under the yellow light, arms wrapped tight around myself, watching the empty road stretch into silence. 11:30, 11:45. Midnight, nothing. I turned to leave, relief and disappointment mixing uneasily in my chest when I heard it. Far off, a familiar rumble. Not loud, not close, but unmistakable. The sound of a bus engine. I froze. My body wanted to run, but something held me in place. The sound grew louder, then faded. Then silence again. Nothing came around the corner. No headlights. No vehicle, just the sound and then nothing. I went home, locked the doors, covered the mirrors. I couldn't explain why, but I did. That night I had the dream again, except this time it was different. This time the bus wasn't empty. The driver was there, but he wasn't driving. He was turned in his seat, facing me fully, hands folded neatly in his lap, as if waiting. I sat frozen in my spot. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And then he did something he hadn't done before. He smiled. It was the faintest curve of the lips, but it filled me with a dread I can't put into words. It wasn't friendly, it wasn't cruel, it was final, like someone sealing a casket. I woke up screaming, and lying beside me on the nightstand was a bus ticket, faded, torn, the ink nearly illegible, but the date was clear, 3 years ago, the same night of the crash, and scrawled on the back in shaky handwriting that wasn't mine. You got off, but did you really leave? I didn't go outside the next day. I barely moved at all. The ticket sat on my kitchen table like a threat, like a whisper from something that shouldn't exist. I tried to tell myself I was cracking under stress. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd picked up an old ticket somewhere and didn't remember. But then I checked my door. No signs of forced entry. No one had come in. And yet the ticket had appeared. I picked it up carefully, afraid it might dissolve under my touch. The date was still there. The ink, though faded, felt fresh. And the handwriting on the back, it wasn't mine, but it looked familiar. Like someone imitating my hand. Or worse, like a version of myself I didn't remember being. That night, the dream returned. Except it didn't feel like a dream anymore. I woke up, or thought I did, sitting in that same seat on the bus. My reflection swayed in the dark window beside me, pale and tired, exactly as I had looked the first night. The bus was moving again, gliding silently down a pitch-black road that seemed to stretch forever. The driver was there too. He didn't speak. This time he didn't even look at me. He just held out his hand. In it, another ticket. This one had no date, no time, just a name, mine. I didn't take it. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't move, like my body was frozen in place, held by something invisible but impossibly heavy. My mouth opened, but no words came out. And then I noticed the others. Rows of passengers I hadn't seen before, all sitting perfectly still, backs straight, heads bowed slightly as if in sleep, or prayer, or something else entirely. None of them moved, none of them breathed, and yet I knew. They had all ridden this bus before, they had all gotten on, like me, some of them had even gotten off, but eventually it came back for them. The bus began to slow, the doors hissed open, but outside there was nothing. Just fog, dense, endless, waiting. The driver turned to me once more, slowly this time, as if giving me a final chance. His eyes were sunken, black pits that reflected nothing. His lips didn't move, but I heard the words anyway. "Are you ready now?" I woke up on the floor of my bedroom, drenched in sweat, the walls spinning around me. My phone said it was 3:33 a.m. Outside my window I heard the low, rumbling purr of an engine idling. I didn't dare look. I've moved since then, more than once, changed my number. Took a new job in another state. But it doesn't matter. Sometimes I still hear it. Late at night, far off in the fog, that slow, deliberate sound of brakes squealing, of doors opening. Sometimes I wake up and find tickets under my pillow, all blank, all waiting. And sometimes when I dream, I'm back on that bus. This time the seat beside me is empty, and I know it's waiting to be filled. By me. Or maybe by you. After our mother died, things were quieter. Not just because the house lost her voice, that gentle hum of someone always nearby, always moving, but because we didn't know what to say to each other anymore. Dad buried himself in work. I was 16, old enough to keep the house in order, cook dinner, get my little sister to school. And then there was Ellie. She was only 7. Small, with big eyes that always looked like they were about to ask a question, but never quite did. She didn't cry much after the funeral. She didn't throw tantrums or scream like I'd read in books about grief. She just got quiet. like something inside her folded inward and stayed there. We moved into a new house 6 weeks later. A fresh start, Dad said. Fewer memories. He said it like it would fix something, like grief was a stain that could be painted over. The place was old, a little crooked in the walls and creaky in the floors. Ellie didn't seem to mind. Her room was the one at the end of the hall, the one with peeling wallpaper and a tall old mirror bolted to the wall, probably too heavy to remove. Ornate, gold-framed, dust-streaked. It looked like it belonged in a different century. I hated it the moment I saw it, but Ellie loved it. "She's pretty," she whispered the first night, standing in front of it in her pajamas. "Who?" I asked. She pointed at her own reflection. "My friend." I laughed it off. Kids and their imaginary friends, right? Especially after something traumatic. I told myself it was her mind trying to find control, someone to talk to. Better a mirror than nothing, I figured. But then she started talking to it every night. At first, it was a whisper, soft enough that I thought she was singing to herself. I'd walk past her room and hear that gentle murmur, like water trickling somewhere just out of sight. I didn't want to intrude. I thought it was helping her cope. Then it got stranger. I'd put her to bed, say good night, turn out the lights. But when I passed her door hours later, I'd hear her again, always talking to the mirror. A voice low, rhythmic, like a conversation, like she was listening as much as she was speaking. One night, I finally asked her, "Ellie, who are you talking to?" She looked up from brushing her doll's hair and said, with that wide-eyed sincerity only little kids can pull off, "My friend in the mirror. He says you don't believe me." I paused. "He?" She nodded. "He talks funny," she added, "but he's really nice. He says he misses having someone to talk to." I didn't know what to say. I told her to get some sleep and left before I could ask more. I told myself again it was harmless, just grief taking strange shapes. But something about her phrasing stayed with me. He misses having someone to talk to. Not, he's lonely. Not, he wants to be my friend. He misses it. Like he'd had someone before. Like he'd done this before. The thing about living with grief is that it dulls your instincts. You begin to excuse things. You chalk up red flags to stress, shadows to fatigue, and strange behavior to coping. That's what I kept doing with Ellie. Ignoring the small things. Brushing them off because acknowledging them would mean facing something I didn't want to believe. Like the way she no longer played with her toys unless the mirror was facing them. Or the fact that she stopped asking me to read to her at night, something she used to beg for, because he tells better stories. I told myself it was just imagination. Just a phase. Maybe even a weird comfort mechanism. Kids talk to themselves. Kids talk to mirrors. It wasn't dangerous. Until the night I heard another voice. It was just past 2 a.m. I had stayed up late studying in the living room, trying to catch up on school while the house slept. I went to the kitchen for water past Ellie's room and froze. Voices, too. One was hers, high, sleepy, innocent. The other was not. It was deep. Slurred slightly like someone trying to speak through water or from far away, but unmistakably male. And wrong. Not like a man's voice. Like something trying to sound like one. I pressed my ear to her door. Ellie giggled softly. Then the other voice spoke. A single word I couldn't quite catch, but it made my skin crawl, like it had weight, like it shouldn't exist in the world we knew. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, except for the soft blue glow of her nightlight. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the mirror, facing it, whispering something. Her eyes were closed. "Ellie!" I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't respond. I called again, louder. She jerked awake, like she hadn't even known she'd been asleep. Blinked up at me, confused. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked at the mirror, then back at me. "Nothing." "You were talking." She shook her head. "I was dreaming." I didn't argue. I just walked in and looked at the mirror. Nothing unusual, just our reflection, slightly warped from the age of the glass. But it felt like it was holding something back, like it was pretending. After that, I moved her bed away from the mirror. Told her it was for feng shui, though I barely knew what that meant. She pouted, but didn't resist. I even covered the mirror with an old sheet. But the next morning, it was uncovered again, and there were small handprints on the glass. Not Ellie's, they were longer, thinner. Wrong. I didn't tell Dad. I didn't tell anyone. I just tried to stay awake at night, tried to keep Ellie busy during the day, but she was growing distant, quiet in a new way. She stopped drawing, stopped humming, and every so often I'd find her standing still in front of the mirror again, not talking, not smiling, just listening. I started keeping my door open at night. It was a small thing, but it made me feel like I had some control. Like if something moved in the hallway, I'd hear it. Like I could protect Ellie if something ever stepped out of that mirror. Because by then I knew something was wrong. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, never rushing or frantic. Always just outside my room, never stopping. I'd get up, heart pounding, and find nothing there. But the mirror in Ellie's room, the mirror was always uncovered again. I began placing small objects in front of it. Books, pillows, even her toy chest once. Anything that would block the view. But each time, by morning, the space was clear, as if someone had gently moved them aside and then returned everything else to perfect order. Ellie started acting differently. Not in the way grief changes a child. I'd already seen that. This was deeper, subtler. She'd stare at people just a little too long before answering. She'd blink slowly, like processing speech took effort. Her voice, usually bright and soft, began sounding distant, detached. And then there was the humming. It started quietly, just outside my door some nights. A tune I didn't recognize, low and repetitive, like a lullaby turned inside out. I'd open the door and find Ellie standing there, half asleep, looking past me. When I asked her what she was doing, she'd whisper, "He wanted me to check on you," and walk away. The next night, I didn't sleep. I sat in a chair just inside her room, flashlight in hand, waiting. She tossed and turned a bit in her sleep, but otherwise didn't stir. The room was quiet, except for the creak of old wood and the soft hum of wind outside the window. Then, around 3 a.m., the temperature dropped. It wasn't my imagination. The air in the room turned sharp, like stepping into a freezer. I could see my own breath, and then the mirror began to change. The surface, once reflecting Ellie's room and my stiff figure in the chair, started to shimmer, like heat rising off pavement, only colder. And her reflection didn't match. I stared at it, unblinking. Ellie lay asleep in her bed, but in the mirror she was sitting upright. Eyes wide open, smiling. It was a slow, unnatural grin, stretched too wide, held too long. Her head tilted slightly, just enough to make me feel like I was being watched. Not by her, but by something else using her face like a mask. Then her mirrored self raised one hand and pressed it to the glass. I heard a whisper, not in the room, not from Ellie, but inside my head. She said, "You don't want to play." I stumbled out of the room, shaking, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear my own breath. When I came back with every ounce of courage I had, the mirror was still. Ellie was still asleep, breathing softly, but the handprint was still there, and it wasn't hers. The next morning, Ellie didn't speak. She sat at the breakfast table with a bowl of cereal going soggy in front of her, eyes glassy, lips pressed shut like they'd forgotten how to open. I asked if she was okay. No answer. I waved my hand in front of her face, gently touched her shoulder. Still nothing. Then slowly she turned to me. Her eyes locked with mine, and for the first time in our lives, I felt like I wasn't looking at my little sister. I was looking at something wearing her. That night, I made a decision. I had read enough stories, seen enough strange signs. This wasn't sleepwalking. This wasn't grief. Something was in that mirror. Something had found Ellie and was now anchoring itself in her. I was going to destroy it. While Ellie slept, I waited until the dead of night. The mirror stood tall and silent in the corner of her room. I approached it with a hammer in one hand, flashlight in the other. My heart thundered so loud I thought it might wake her. I pulled the sheet off. There was no reflection, no room, no bed, no me, only darkness. Endless, thick, like looking down into a deep well. Then movement. Two eyes opened in the black, faintly glowing, watching me, and a smile began to spread, but not on a face, just floating. Teeth, wide and sharp, stretching far too long, like it was pleased, like it had been waiting for this moment. My hands trembled. I raised the hammer. Just as I swung, I heard her, not from the bed, from inside the mirror. "Please," Ellie whispered. "Don't leave me here." I froze. The hammer fell from my hand with a dull thud against the carpet. The reflection suddenly snapped back into place. The room, The bed, the mirror version of me, holding the flashlight. Only Ellie was gone. I ran to the bed. She was there, still breathing, still warm, but she didn't respond when I shook her. I yelled, I cried. Nothing. It was like her body was just days past. We brought her to doctors, neurologists, therapists. They called it a catatonic state, stress-induced trauma maybe, but no one had answers. No one could explain the timing, the look in her eyes when they did briefly open, because they weren't Ellie's eyes anymore. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I passed her room at night, I'd find the mirror uncovered again. Waiting. I tried throwing it away. It came back. I tried smashing it. The glass wouldn't crack. One night I caught a glimpse of it, and my reflection didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I don't see Ellie in my dreams anymore. I see myself, standing on the other side, smiling, waiting for me to come home. It started with the light over my kitchen table, a cheap ceiling fixture, one of those plastic domes screwed into the drywall that hums faintly when it's on too long. It had always been a little temperamental, or so I thought. A soft flicker now and then when the weather got humid, or when I ran the microwave and toaster at the same time. But then I noticed something. It only flickered when I was alone. At first I dismissed it. Coincidence. Electrical gremlins. The kind of thing you half register in the back of your mind and then forget 5 minutes later. But the pattern became impossible to ignore. When friends came over, nothing. Not a single flicker, not a single buzz. The light stayed steady and warm, like it had nothing to hide. But the moment the door closed behind my last guest, the blinking would start again. Quick, sharp pulses. 1, 2. Then darkness for a breath too long before the bulb flared back to life. It became a ritual, almost. A signal. A reminder that I was alone, and something else was not. I told myself it was wiring. The building was old, the kind of place that settled loudly at night and had weird smells when it rained. My landlord, Rick, was the kind of guy who did repairs only when 3 tenants complained at the same time. So I didn't expect much when I called him about it. He sent over a guy named Lou, gruff, hands like cracked leather, looked like he hadn't slept in days. He replaced the bulb, tightened the wiring, muttered something about cheap old sockets, and left. That night, the light flickered again. Faster this time. Almost like it was reacting. I tried to test it. Sat under the fixture with my phone camera on, watching the bulb. I talked out loud to no one, asked if it was there, if it was listening. The light blinked once. I laughed nervously. "Do it again," I whispered. Nothing. Then, right as I reached to turn it off, it blinked again. Twice, slow and deliberate. I stopped laughing. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. I knew how it would sound. Paranormal nonsense. Lonely guy in a dusty apartment reading too many horror threads online. But it wasn't just the light anymore. The room itself began to feel aware. I'd walk into the kitchen and feel the air change, thicker somehow. Charged. Like the seconds just before a thunderstorm hits, when you know something is coming but can't see it yet. Sometimes when I sat in silence, I'd hear the faintest creak from the ceiling. Not the normal kind. Not pipes or settling wood. These were soft, rhythmic, like something crawling. Overhead. I started sleeping with the lights on. It wasn't a conscious decision at first. I'd just forget to turn them off, or I'd lie down with the intention of flipping the switch once I felt sleepy, but never quite made it. And honestly, I didn't care. Sleep with the lights on was better than waking up in total darkness with that light overhead stuttering like it was trying to say something. The flickering had changed too. It wasn't random anymore. It had a rhythm, a pattern, almost like a language I couldn't understand. 3 quick blinks, pause, 1 long, 2 short. I found myself trying to decode it, half laughing at myself for treating a faulty bulb like some kind of Morse code ghost. But deep down, I wasn't laughing. Because I'd started hearing things, always when I was alone, always at night. Soft creaks above me, slow and deliberate, like weight shifting across beams. I lived on the top floor. There was no one above me. No attic, no crawl space, just ceiling and something that moved. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was nothing. Stress. A bad week. Maybe my imagination feeding on the flickering light. But then the dreams began. I'd find myself lying in bed, frozen, staring at the ceiling, while the bulb above me pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Something would be up there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it watching me through the ceiling, waiting for me to sleep. Sometimes, in the dreams, I would drift upward, not float, not fly, but be pulled, like my body was being drawn into the ceiling itself. One night, I woke up with my blanket halfway off the bed, my neck stiff and sore, as if I'd been craning my head back at an impossible angle for hours, and the light was off. Not flickering, just off, dead. I sat up in the dark, heart hammering, throat dry. My hands scrambled for the lamp beside my bed. When it finally clicked on, the overhead light above me snapped back to life. It blinked, once, then again, and then stayed steady. But for just a second I saw it, not clearly, not full, just a shape shift along the ceiling, like a shadow sliding away just before you turned your head. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a floaty in my vision. But I knew it had been there. The next day, I bought a motion sensor camera and installed it discreetly in the corner of my room, pointed straight at the ceiling light. It felt stupid at first, paranormal paranoia. But I needed to know. That night I slept restlessly. The light flickered, of course, and the next morning, when I checked the footage, the light above my bed flickered as expected, and then something moved. Not on the floor, not in the shadows, but on the ceiling. A figure. Slender, pale, crawling on all fours like a spider, limbs bending at angles that weren't human. Its head hung low, twitching as it crept toward the camera. Right before the footage cut to static, it looked up. Just a blur of eyes too wide and a mouth hanging open too long. And then the light went out. I didn't sleep the next night. After seeing the footage, I couldn't bring myself to lie beneath that light again. Not with the memory of that thing still fresh in my mind. The way it moved. The way it watched. Like it had always known I was watching it too. I stayed on the couch in the living room with every lamp in the apartment turned on, humming with artificial warmth. I didn't review the rest of the camera footage that night. I couldn't. My hands shook every time I hovered the mouse near the timeline. But by morning, curiosity overpowered fear. I made coffee, though my stomach churned too much to drink it, and finally sat down to scrub through the recording. I slowed it down, frame by frame. There it was. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the light above my bed flickered 3 times, then stayed on. But in the upper frame, something began to move. Just shadows at first, then a full form. It unfolded slowly, like it had been part of the ceiling all along, and was only now remembering how to separate itself from the plaster. It crawled. That was the worst part. It didn't float or glide or teleport. It crawled. With effort, with weight, like a real thing. And then it looked straight at the camera, not toward me, at the lens, as if it knew, and right before the footage cut to static, its mouth began to move. I couldn't hear anything, the camera had no audio, but I saw the shape of the lips, repeating something, over and over, one word, down. I shut the laptop and shoved it under the couch. That afternoon, I called an electrician. I didn't mention the footage, of course, just said the ceiling light was faulty, flickering constantly. He came by that evening, chipper and casual, stepping through my apartment like he'd seen it all before. I led him to the bedroom and stood awkwardly as he examined the fixture. He tugged at the base, unscrewed the cover, tested the current. All good, he said eventually, shrugging. Wiring solid, no reason for it to be flickering. Could just be a bad bulb, happens with cheaper LEDs sometimes. I nodded numbly, but as he started packing up, he paused. You know, he said, glancing back at the ceiling. There's something weird about the space above this room. I turned. What do you mean? He scratched his head. There shouldn't be a gap. It's a top-floor unit, right? But there's this hollow sound, like something's layered up there. I don't know, maybe insulation got pulled out of place. Can you get up there? I asked. He looked uncertain. Not really. No attic hatch. You'd have to cut through the ceiling to check. I didn't press it. I thanked him and let him go. But that night the light didn't flicker. It stayed on, perfectly steady, and I didn't feel relief. I felt dread. Because if the flickering was a warning, a signal that something was active, then what did it mean now that it had gone silent? What did it mean that the thing didn't need to move above me anymore? The silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like the breath before a scream. For 3 nights straight, the ceiling light didn't flicker. It shone perfectly, no pulsing, no humming, no static. And during those nights, the apartment felt still. Too still. Like it had exhaled and was holding something in, like something was waiting. I didn't check the footage those nights. I couldn't. I kept the cameras running, sure, but I didn't want to know what they might have captured while I slept on the couch, blanket clutched to my chest, every bulb in the apartment blazing. On the 4th night, I broke. I had to know. I sat down, opened the folder labeled Bedroom Night 4, and clicked play. For hours, nothing happened. Just me, shifting in bed, rolling over, sighing in my sleep. The light above me never wavered, just glowed. But at 3:33 a.m., something changed. Not in the light, not in the sound. In me. My body, frozen in mid-turn, stopped moving. And then my head turned slowly, impossibly slowly, until my sleeping face was staring directly at the camera. But my eyes were still shut. And then I smiled. It was brief, barely noticeable, but it was there. The corners of my mouth curling up in a way I've never smiled before. It didn't look like sleep. It didn't look like me. It looked like someone else was using my face. And then the light blinked. Just once. And everything went dark. I slammed the laptop shut. I didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. But on the 7th night, I caved. My body just gave out. I passed out on the couch with the lights on, a cup of coffee still warm in my hand. And when I woke up, the ceiling light was off. Not burnt out, not broken, just off. I didn't remember turning it off. I sat up slowly, every muscle stiff with tension. The living room was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears like water. I stood and walked toward the bedroom. The door was open, the light was out, and something had been moved. The bed, slightly crooked, the blanket pulled to one side, and on the floor, directly beneath the ceiling fixture, a trail of dust. Fine, grey, like something had dropped down from above. I looked up, and I saw it. Not the thing, not the creature, the hole. A small, perfect circle in the plaster, clean, almost surgical, like something had bored its way down, not up. And there, hanging loosely from the socket of the once flickering light, was the bulb. Unscrewed. Left dangling. I never turned it off. It did. The flickering wasn't a malfunction. It was a warning. And now, the light doesn't flicker anymore. Because there's nothing left to warn me. Whatever was watching me from the ceiling isn't watching anymore. It's here now, and I sleep in the dark. Not because I want to, but because the light refuses to turn back on.